It's 2013. I'm 1 year away from graduating and wondering what the hell I'm going to do with my degree. But fortunately, there is a YouTube video that can distract me from that. CD Projekt Red launches the Cyberpunk 2077 teaser trailer that would end up hyping millions of fans. The trailer shows a woman with very advanced body augmentations being attacked by heavily equipped police. She is severely outnumbered and frankly looks like the victim in this scene. Is she really that dangerous, or are the police being a bit trigger-happy? These are questions that can generate believable conflicts in a story. The music is Bullets by Archive, a band that I would end up seeing live in a concert years later. This whole scene is classic cyberpunk, and it feels like CD Projekt Red are on the right track. They understand what cyberpunk is, and they're going to blow our minds with scenes like these. We have the cyber element of the story with the aggressive-looking blades, and the punk element as someone who looks potentially like a rebel fights oppressive forces. 7 years later, however, not only do we not get such a scene, but it seems like game development is still miles away from bringing to life a true cyberpunk open world. In my opinion, CD Projekt Red has given us the most extensive demo of a cyberpunk open world RPG, but it remains just that. There have been quite a few videos lately celebrating Cyberpunk 2077's recovery. That somehow it managed to pull itself out from being one of the biggest disappointments of gaming and turn itself into one of the biggest games of all time. I just failed to see the argument for that. Sure, CDPR managed to patch game-breaking bugs that made the game unplayable and brought some quality of life fixes and indeed improved the skill tree vastly. And to be honest, playing the game for a second time in 24, I could definitely feel those changes. I even managed to create a sort of John Wick build that uses dash and shoots enemies point blank, and it honestly felt very fun. But this is not a video about 2077's bugs, although they're still there, still breaking the game's immersion and frankly any illusion of a role-playing experience. This is about 2077's game design, writing, and world building. These are things that cannot be patched, as they are in the game's core design. Now let me start by saying that when I first went into this game, I did so with extreme enthusiasm. So much so that I didn't realize how much it lacked until I finished it. I even spent hours looking for prophetic graffitis or had a ride around Night City on my Uber bike. I made the effort every role-playing gamer should make, to create a story inside my head, inside this game, to get into it. And there are moments when the game helps you do that, only to ruin your immersion or simply outright bore you a moment later. Sure, video games are a pastime, but for those of us who are truly passionate about them, they're much more than that. Some of our most memorable moments in life might be from video games, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I have a hard time thinking of anything memorable in Cyberpunk 2077. And no, it's not the bugs or the poor AI of the NPCs or the slew of problems that 2077 had during its launch. It's much deeper than that. It feels to me like the developers of this game haven't even watched Blade Runner, or Ghost in a Shell, or even read Neuromancer, a book that many consider to be the Bible of the cyberpunk genre. They've not interacted at all with the titles that made cyberpunk a genre, or if they did, they didn't learn anything from them. My concern is that with Cyberpunk 2077 currently showing overwhelmingly positive reviews, CDPR will move away from this experience thinking they managed to pull it off, to create a AAA cyberpunk experience. And an even greater concern is that 2077 might become the standard for AAA cyberpunk games. But I don't want this video to turn into a negative review, although at times it might feel like that. So instead of looking at this video as a direct critique, let's talk about the cyberpunk genre. What fits into the genre and what doesn't. And let's figure out if Cyberpunk 2077 is, at the end of the day, a true representative of cyberpunk, or just a game that has cyberpunk elements which had the benefit of receiving incredible support from its fans. Because let's face it, CD Projekt Red fans were really patient with this game. To be precise, 8-year patient before its launch, and another 4 more years since its launch. Also, let's make a clear distinction between cyberpunk as a genre and 2077, which is the title of the game. And look, this is my subjective view and does not pretend to represent everything or even cover all the aspects of the cyberpunk genre. I believe in constructive criticism, and as someone who has relatives working in the gaming industry, I will try my best to be respectful to the people who worked at this game. Video games are the most complex form of art. We can never truly know what goes on behind the scenes of the making of a video game. And at the end of the day, I believe that everyone at CD Projekt Red truly wanted to make a good game. So without further ado, let's talk about why Cyberpunk 2077 is not very cyberpunk. In 1982, the movie called Blade Runner shocks audiences around the world with its groundbreaking visuals, dystopian atmosphere, and its bleak but evocative music. In time, it would become a cyberpunk classic. But in 82, many people didn't know what cyberpunk was. In fact, it wasn't even an established genre yet. In 1984, 2 years later, a book called Neuromancer comes out, depicting a futuristic urban setting with hackers, body augmentations, and a world oppressed by capitalist hegemony. The cyberpunk genre finally takes shape, featuring a dark technological dystopia. It is a stark prediction of what the immediate future of humanity will look like, and we could argue that we're already living it. Blade Runner itself is the adaptation of the 1968 book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which could be called an early cyberpunk creation. We'll just call it Androids for the purposes of this video. Androids follows the story of a detective who hunts down androids in a post-humanist post-war future when Earth becomes almost uninhabitable. Empathy is almost dead, and isolation is ingrained in a society where a single person can occupy an entire block all by themselves. The greatest fear of humanity is that androids will replace them, synthetic humans that have no true feelings except for their need for survival and cold logic reasoning. Rick Deckard is a bounty hunter who hunts down the last remaining survivors of an advanced model of androids who are almost indistinguishable from humans. The company behind the invention of these androids is, as expected, only interested in profit. People buy electric animals instead of the unaffordable real ones. Rick himself is doing the bounties just so that he can afford a real live animal that would cure his wife's depression. It's basically copium at its worst. But while hunting down the androids, Rick is faced with the inhumanity of the act and questions whether androids are any different from humans. Androids already has all the essential features of a cyberpunk story, even though Philip K. Dick had no idea he was writing a cyberpunk novel at that time. The world is a dystopian capitalist nightmare, people search for real connections, and there is the philosophical debate of human versus machine. As expected for that time, there are very little punk elements to the story. The book is seen as groundbreaking and, in retrospect, the precursor of the cyberpunk genre. But the movie surpasses the book, bringing to life this post-humanism imagined by a sci-fi writer in 1968. Androids is a very good story in which the real villain is capitalism, which crushes people not only financially, but dehumanizes them. Blade Runner takes that idea but adds the amazing atmospheric experience and sprinkles in some nihilistic themes. While the androids in the book remain mostly flat characters, Blade Runner turns the android antagonist Roy Batty into a philosophical debater. Cyberpunk as a genre becomes a political and philosophical theme of the near possible future, and the amazing cinematography and music managed to create an atmosphere of immersive escapism. Welcome to Cyberpunk, a multicultural, multi-ethnic world which seems so full yet feels so lonely. Companies become so powerful that they dictate every aspect of human life, and even control governments. People search for connections, whether that is in the form of AI or virtual experiences. Real human connection is a luxury. Body augmentation is a necessity. But there is some solace in the haze of the neon lights, a state of awe inspired by the brutalist architecture and the ephemeral electronic music. There's also the promise of a reckoning, as augmented rebellious punks strike back at the capitalist oppression. All the movies post-Blade Runner are almost an exact replica of it. It's like Blade Runner completely and irrevocably understood what cyberpunk was supposed to be, and no one ever argued with it. It's one of my favorite films, from cinematography and music to the acting and the symbolic ending. But there is yet another feature that is quintessential to cyberpunk: the police. Because in a world that is run by companies, in which there is an ever-widening gap between the poor and the rich, police is the buffer zone between the two classes. An oppressed society will always have police at its core. But the police are humans too. Then we get the noir aspect of cyberpunk, which often features a battered detective going on some wild goose chase with the decadence of the city in the background. Noir is dark, foreboding and mature. This is a perfect marriage, as cyberpunk is ultimately a question about humanity, and noir stories almost always end up becoming existential philosophies. The detective's investigation usually ends up at the top of the society, where the rich think themselves all-powerful. This goes hand in hand with the villain companies, which are usually at the core of cyberpunk. Altered Carbon is a perfect example of this blend of genres, where a soldier is brought back from deep sleep, called storage, to investigate the murder of a rich man. The philosophical theme of an afterlife is immediately obvious, as people in this universe can resurrect themselves by downloading their consciousness into new bodies, a process called resleeving. The capitalist element is brought by the fact that many can't afford a fully mature body to download to. The Expanse, another book-turned-TV show, is mostly sci-fi, but with strong elements of cyberpunk, as it starts with a detective investigating the disappearance of a rich girl. You're seeing the trope, right? But it's admittedly a very good trope. More examples include Ghost in a Shell, a cyberpunk show featuring an entire police brigade with a female android as its leader. RoboCop, a movie about a cyber-augmented policeman. The Matrix, a world oppressed by machines which use a replica of federal agents to hunt down those who break the virtual veil. Akira is a cyberpunk story about what psychic powers can do and the dangers of the post-human. Even Minority Report counts as a cyberpunk film. What about games? Well, almost all of the above had some sort of game version, but the most notable mentions that came before Cyberpunk 2077 are the Deus Ex series and System Shock. These games don't have any noir aspect per se, but use core cyberpunk themes that are integrated well into the narrative and gameplay mechanic. There are even game adaptations of Blade Runner and of course the Neuromancer book series. All of these came before Cyberpunk 2077. All of these had the quintessential features of a cyberpunk world. A dystopian society caused by unchecked rule of private corporations, cyberpunk implants and a growing unrest and concern about body augmentations and the idea of the post-human. A group of anti-establishment punks who are well-versed in information technology, hard-boiled detective and noir influences, and finally, a sub-center theme of existentialism and what it means to be human. All of the titles I mentioned follow these rules, but there is more. Each one of these titles pursue a much deeper topic. Blade Runner is about the importance of empathy, as Rick dehumanizes himself by killing androids for money, becoming nothing more than an android himself. Ghost in a Shell takes that idea even further and argues that the essence of humanity is not its DNA or physical trait, but the ghost, the spiritual essence encased by the body, be it cybernetic or flesh. Deus Ex presents the inevitable division of society as it deals with the increasing use of body augmentations. Akira is about the young generation being forsaken by society and fighting to carve a place for themselves in it, and many other things. Why am I mixing movies and games? Because all of them get it. All of them seem to know exactly what cyberpunk is. Cyberpunk 2077 does not. It takes away bits and pieces from other works and stirs them into a product that is arrogantly named cyberpunk, without having any consistency with the genre that gave its name. So here is where the beginning of the game is really important, because it sets the tone of the story, character, and world building. Welcome to Cyberpunk 2077, a world so filled with aggression that it seems everyone is taking testosterone pills with their coffee. There are two things I don't understand about this intro cinematic. Why is the tone so derisive? Like the hardships of the people of Night City is some kind of reality show. This game takes itself very seriously at times. You have themes of death, drug addiction, and even what it means to come to terms with your own self. The second thing I don't get is, if you're going to pay a top-rated actor to do voice acting in this game, why not have him narrate the beginning of the game? That would just build up the hype and make us excited to meet his character. Also, Good Morning Night City just sounds like a bad sentence, like Good Evening Morning Town. The music, however, is probably one of the best tracks in the game. Rebel Path was absolutely wasted on this trite introduction. Let's just do a quick comparison with the intro of Deus Ex Mankind Divided.
I once thought I could save the world. Now look at it.
In yet another augmented terror attack, 251 passengers aboard.
I know the Call of Duty tone of Mankind Divided is quite different from the Mad Max Fury Road tone of 2077, but it makes me take the game seriously, and I immediately empathize with the protagonist when he says that he's trying to make the world better. In 2077, you get to choose 3 different backgrounds: the corpo, a lackey of the capitalist machine, a street kid trying to carve a living for themselves in Night City, or a nomad, a pariah of society who rejects the world and its superficial rules, a true rebel. Now, if you've played the game, what I'm about to say is no revelation. These different backgrounds don't mean anything. The only real background is that of the street kid. But when I first played the game, I thought this was amazing. If you spent 5 minutes thinking about what path to choose, like I did, then you took this game seriously. You probably wondered about all the possible handcrafted quests that awaited these 3 characters. You were probably thinking about varied player bases, faction approval rate, dialogue options, unimaginable amount of replayability. But CDPR unfortunately didn't take your choice seriously. They had no time or will to make real playable paths. Yeah, sure, there's a few inconsequential dialogue options, but all they do is to make V seem smarter in some scenes, not you, the player. These background stories have no bearing on the game, and they're a little more than glorified cinematics where most of the action just happens without any of your input. It doesn't matter what dialogue options you choose. Really, it doesn't. But some moments do contribute to good world building and set up the tone of the game. I especially like the Corpo story, where you're caught in the middle of company politicking and maneuvering. Also, since the world of the game revolves around the Arasaka company and its rivals, it makes sense that the game gives you the chance to play as one of its employees, for all of 10 minutes. In the Corpo story, you witness the lengths a company in 2077 will go to protect its financial interests, as you see an entire board of members being assassinated and the blame shifted to another company just to bring down their stock numbers. You don't really see the world at this point, but you get the impression that there's an actual war out there, where companies don't shy away from killing, manipulating, and controlling the world scene. Imagine that. There must be chaos on the streets. What I really liked about this backstory was the short trip you take with your flying limousine through Night City. For a good half a minute, I had no doubt that I was in a real cyberpunk universe. The music reminiscent of Blade Runner, the haze of neon lights, the bleak feeling of inescapable utter loneliness. And like so many good moments in this game, it's interrupted by a phone call. It's your life coach explaining about troubling biometrics readings in V, our protagonist. It has no bearing on the game, no consequence, except to show that V can afford the life coach. Let's just look at a similar scene in GTA 5, where Michael's story starts with him talking to his therapist. Michael complains about his son, which is relevant as that relationship will develop throughout the game. He complains about young people nowadays and exhibits anger, which is relevant to his middle-life crisis, which is also developed throughout the game. Finally, it shows Michael can afford a Hollywood-rate therapist, which means he's rich, another situation which is relevant to future scenes in the game. The keyword here is relevance. Back to V, who bullies basketball players on the roof with his body augmentations, another theme that is poorly handled, as I will show later. But this is where the Corpo story ends, because the rest doesn't matter. You don't even get to do the job that your boss gave you. The whole scene with the Arasaka goons is just to establish your friendship with Jackie, who jumps to your defense. And then you see the worst, the absolute worst intro to a game I have ever experienced. Wait, didn't we already have an intro? Well, I guess this is a second intro. A montage which summarizes 6 months of the game's story, spent with Jackie and other people whom you've never met. In this summary of your actions, you see yourself dancing, partying, committing crime, and making money. Promise me there wasn't one tiny moment in which you felt completely pushed out of the game at this point. Because for a game for which developers argue that they wanted to give the player a personal first-person experience with a lot of freedom, this just doesn't make sense. The rushed launch of 2077 is not a secret, so many people assume these were playable missions that were just cut from the game, hence the montage summary. There are even fans who offered to pay to get these missions as a DLC. But then, we find out that the devs did do this intentionally.
Alright, on to the half-year montage, yes. After which I think we're able to cut one of the most controversial moments in the game, let's say. A lot of concerns on the internet that it should have been playable and so on. We always thought about the sequence as such, and we always wanted to speed up the story, let's say, a little bit to what's really crucial for it. And for example, from my perspective, if we really spent those 6 months here with Jackie, like from the screenplay structure point of view, let's say, you are in like the first act and actually before even like, you know, the turning point and so on. So it will be just like stretching it for super long, and here the actual action starts, and it starts once like at the end of the heist, you know, when you get the chip with Johnny Silverhand in your head.
Imagine skipping through the whole opening scene of Skyrim, where the dragon attacks Helgen, and you have to pick a side between Imperial and Nord, and you learn how to fight. And you learn that devs don't care at all about arachnophobia, but you still love the game somehow, so you move on. And then you fight the bear or sneak around the bear because you have actual choices of gameplay, and then you walk all the way to Riverwood and help the Valerius siblings get back their dragon claw, and you walk into a dungeon for the first time, but before that you pick your first sign, or you don't, and you walk into your first bandit mine, or you don't. Don't forget about the beautiful scenery that you discover along the way. And oh my god, there is so much happening here in this game made in 2011. No, none of that. You get a cinematic of all those things, then get brought in front of Balgrove, who asks you to help defend the town against the dragon. Without having any chance to get accustomed to the world, you get thrown into a plot just because the developers wanted you to get to the good part of the game. You know, the dragon fight. But that dragon fight is only effective because of the build-up you had leading up to it. Skyrim is not perfect, but it does have a brilliant beginning, and so do other games. You can't just say, I'm going to skip the beginning of the game to get you to the real action. Okay, so what does this have to do with Cyberpunk? Because Cyberpunk stories are deeply immersive. They usually put you in the shoes of a character that you care about immediately. The good handsome cop who is mutilated and turned into a robot. The mysterious cop with sad eyes pulling wires from the back of her head. The hacker whose world illusion just shatters as he finds out that nothing is real. Wait, why did 2077 not have a cop or a hacker as the main character? Oh yes, it wanted to be original. So let's look at the Street Kid story. This was the worst of the three background stories. This guy who talks like a character in a 90s B-rate movie sends you to steal a car, and you don't get to steal it. That's it. That's the story. But ironically, V ends up being a street kid no matter what path you choose. What CDPR should have done is go with one background story and write it well. If we had managed to connect with V's story from the beginning, then we would have cared much more when she's suffering from the effects of the Soul Killer. And this is where CDPR's first mistake was, in having a main customizable character with a unique name, but not a relatable backstory. You can have two cakes and all that. Okay, so why is V a street kid? Because they sound like a street kid.
Vic, shit's getting real. Got a job from Dex to Sean, hitting the major leagues. Need tech that can perform.
Also, the quest that starts the main plot is a heist, which goes in line with a street kid story. The fame system of the game is called street cred. You take odd jobs from odd people. You wear jackets. All day. Every day. You're a street kid. Nothing wrong with that. Then why would you make me believe, even for a second, that I can be a corpo or a nomad? It's just a big tease. But that's the least of 2077's problems. Let's look at the beginning and focus on the few amazing moments of Cyberpunk that this game, in my opinion, has. Your first quest, that is not a 5-minute montage, is to investigate the disappearance of a rich woman kidnapped by scavengers. It's the trope. They're doing the trope. I'm excited. You can see the handcrafting that went into this first quest, with the lady that comes out of her flat while you walk past. From the moment you walk in and see the dismembered augmented body on the table, you feel the oppressive dystopia that is supposed to be Cyberpunk. The low light, the brutality of the gang members, the uncertainty. They're doing it. CDPR is pulling the noir card, and you feel like one of those detectives who's just stumbled on a terrible conspiracy. Imagine if some big company is paying these guys to kidnap premium augmented citizens. Maybe as a revenge. What about the scavengers? Are they fighting against corporations or are they working for them? It's that morally gray area that we love in role-playing games. And then there is the kidnapped person herself. Who is she? And most importantly, who is she related to? Could this be a feud between CEOs or is it just an accident? Don't worry, none of these questions will ever be answered. But there is a limit to the handcrafting even in this starter quest. Jackie kind of teleports around to give you the impression he's syncing with your movements. There's also a limit to the sneak option of dealing with the quest, as the only way to get past the big guy guarding the door is to kill him. When you finally find the woman barely alive and discover that she's a premium client of Trauma Team, the capitalist theme of Cyberpunk takes shape. The whole scene where the armed medical team arrives and takes her is really good. When they leave, you feel like a nobody. No one thanks you, you get no credit. And that's exactly what you should get from this quest. A thankless world. Things you can only dream of, like Premium Trauma Team, are alien to you. You're just a mercenary paid to do a job. After you leave with Jackie, you can admire the true neon dystopia of Night City. On your way home, you see a scene where MaxStack, the SWAT version of the police in Night City, completely obliterates some low-street criminals. I love this scene as it introduces MaxStack as a potential antagonist in the story. The two scenes with the kidnapped girl in Max Stack, the city as Jackie drives you, his humor as he deals with the police officer, although it has its limitations, I felt like this somehow made up for the montage and the cinematic beginning that we just experienced. Hell, I even forgot about it. So what now? I'm sure the woman's mom or dad is some high CEO who is deeply embarrassed that their girl can just be kidnapped like that. They want to get to the bottom of this, get revenge on the scavengers. They're going to offer us a job, but only if we use this mysterious and experimental brain chip that they give us, which turns out to be the soul killer. They use us, no? Okay, that was just an idea that would have given consistency with the beginning of the game. All you get from the rescue mission is some money, if you remember to visit the fixer who gave it to you. I remembered after about 10 hours of the game. This quest has no bearing on the story of the game, it's just a tutorial quest. Jackie and V want to play in the big leagues. A rich woman kidnapped by scavengers for body mods isn't the big leagues. I feel like CDPR lost a great opportunity with this quest, and we will never know why. At this point, there are quite a lot of cyber aspects of the game, and an equal amount of punk elements in Jackie's demeanor and the poor bastards who get eviscerated by Max Stack. And Max Stack will definitely be integrated in the main story in a meaningful way, right? So, let's talk about the cyber in 2077. Senior WA, in his article about the visions of humanity in Blade Runner and Cyberpunk, talks about how the terms cyberpunk and neuromancer are portmanteau words which alloy human concepts to mechanical ones, as perhaps do Blade and Runner. Portmanteau is a word made of two words that are interconnected, like a purse. The word cyberpunk is the explanation of the genre, basically. Cyber and punk are two essential elements that define the central theme of a cyberpunk story. Let's see if 2077 has enough cyber or punk in it, but first let's take a look at the inspiration 2077 draws from important cyberpunk creations. First of all, there are some glaring similarities with Neuromancer. In Neuromancer, the protagonist is a hacker whose job as a criminal is to enter a virtual world called the Matrix to steal money and data. He's also referred to as a console cowboy. His partner is Molly Millions, a mercenary nicknamed Razor Girl, because of her retractable razor-sharp blades. The world of Neuromancer is called Night City. Does that sound familiar? Molly mourns a character called Johnny. She's also what is called a street samurai. One of the main plots of the story is the retrieval of someone's saved consciousness. In 2077, we end up stealing a data chip which contains the consciousness of Johnny Silverhand, a rebel cowboy who fights against corporations. In 2077, we have Netrunners, who are the hackers of Night City, but also a virtual world called the Net, where Netrunners can have three-dimensional experiences similar to the Matrix. There is even an AI in both Neuromancer and 2077 who wants to escape and gain power. Neuromancer is not the only inspiration of 2077. The tabletop game Cyberpunk 2020, itself inspired from another book called Hardwire, also lays quite a strong foundation for the different names and elements of the game. After all, CDPR had to license the name Cyberpunk from Telsorian Games. But there are other ideas that were used before. Cyberpsychosis, a condition of which augmented humans suffer in 2077, is reminiscent of the androids going AWOL in Blade Runner. Rick Deckard is not hunting androids just because they are androids. These androids have turned against their masters and gone rogue. You might say that they are suffering from a sort of glitch or psychosis. The ubiquitous TV presenter Ziggy is another inspiration from androids, where Friendly Buster, a TV presenter, appears throughout the story. Buster, however, ends up becoming part of the story in androids, while Ziggy is just a clown that we have to listen to when loading games or riding elevators. And finally, the idea of an AI that is the mastermind behind the plot was used by System Shock and Deus Ex 20 years ahead of 2077. Mega buildings is another important element of environmental design of Night City, a feature that first appeared in the Dread comic, and then became a major plot element of the 2012 cult classic movie. I'm absolutely fine with all this inspiration, by the way. In fact, I think that's what all creators should do. But it felt to me like CDPR took bits of all these cyberpunk creations and tossed them into a medieval stew. For example, Mega City 1 is crucial to the plot of Dread, as most of the action takes place in a super apartment block. The block is a world in itself, as once it closes, the gangs inside are all powerful, and even the highest level of police doesn't have authority over it. In 2077, the Mega Building is just an inconvenience, as every time we visit our apartment, we have to spend a lot of time going up and down. So let's start with the most obvious aspect of cyber in this game, which is body augmentations or body mods. Almost everyone in Night City has a body mod, whether it is a chrome arm or a chrome leg, or the robotic glove that both Judy and V are wearing. Even kids have some sort of VR glasses that they wear with the same casualty as kids in the 60s had yo-yos. But as we wander through Night City, we start to question the purpose of these body mods. They are very random. You see them in the richer areas of the city, also in the poorer areas. And no, I'm not saying that poor people shouldn't have them. I'm just saying it's odd, considering we are reminded again and again of the poverty that is supposedly rife in Night City.
They voted my city the worst place to live in America. Main issues, sky-high rate of violence, and more people living below the poverty line than anywhere else.
A chrome arm costs anywhere between 10 and 30k. These are the people who can't afford basic medical cover, but they can afford to be freaking Terminators. We see commercials about areas which have radiation and real water is $99 a bottle. And remember, the whole premise of V's main plot is that she accepts a highly dangerous job from a complete stranger for a big payday and fame. We are repeatedly shown the financial pressure of 2077 society, from people who can't afford rent to the high prevalence of crime, which is, of course, the result of poverty. But sometimes it almost feels like the NPCs are on a catwalk, rather than needing these body mods. I mean, are all these people demolitionists who lost their arms in the Unification War? It just feels off. So maybe there are people who used to have a lot, became destitute and retained their body mods. Fair. But there is no way to talk to any of them to find that out. And as this user points out brilliantly, how can you keep them when said body mods require regular checkups and maintenance? As the email of the cyber psycho clearly points out. And can I just pause here for a second and say just how derisive the term psycho sounds for someone who ended up having mental health problems because they couldn't afford medication. But that would mean that everyone who has a body mod would suffer from cyberpsychosis, which is just not the case. Initially, it just seems like a gross negligence of world building, until you realize that most of these non-player characters are just spawned randomly. Sometimes they even have the same roles, same lines, but once you load the game or even come back from an area, they just look different. But this completely strips away any personality or stories that these people have and make the body augmentations a simple cosmetic that people may or may not wear, whether the algorithm gave them one. The lack of lore for body modifications in Night City is compounded by the fact that its residents are completely randomized and have no personal stories, or even a few simple lines of dialogue that they can share with V. Did you have a feeling that Night City just feels soulless even though on high density crowd it's packed full of people?
I'm starting to think that everybody in this goddamn town is a robot.
Well, it's because it is soulless. The NPCs are generated to fill the place up. So, for example, I decided to follow this lady. I promise you it's not what you think. So, she starts by smoking a cigarette and telling me to bugger off. And at this point, we just have to accept that people in the year 2077 will be that antisocial. Then she goes into a stroll around the block, peruses some noodles, which she never buys. She eventually buys a can of soda, walks back up and lights another cigarette. Okay, I will say for me this was pretty immersive, even though I couldn't talk to her. Then my whole fantasy is ruined when this man spawns out of nowhere to start what I like to call the walk. NPCs in this game are very good at achieving their daily steps. But then as I follow him, I see the lady again. I mean, who's stalking who at this point, am I right? So I just have to accept that she has a twin who happens to live on the same block and wears the exact same clothes. But no, the game just teleported her back, although it seems there are a lot of identical twins in Night City. Need I remind you that this was recorded in March 2025. But the problem is not randomly spawned NPCs and unlikely twins, it's the fact that you can talk to these people. They can't tell you their story, what they think about augmentations, about corporations, about the fact that real water costs $99. So, CDPR didn't have time or the means to create such a large array of unique characters, so they randomized them based on a procedural algorithm. Well, if that's the case, then go back and change the lore. Find some excuse for so many people wearing Chrome, who can't afford food and rent. Maybe these body mods were purely experimental, unfinished, and given for free, so a lot of people ended up with them, and it made their life worse. The cyberpsychosis missions offer some stories behind the body mods, but they are isolated cases and not consistent enough to explain globally. In Mankind Divided, you see the effects body augmentations have on people directly. They need drugs to sustain them, and this addiction is destroying their lives. There is a direct consequence of having body mods, which is visible immediately and has an effect on the game's story. But maybe passers-by are inconsequential to the story, so surely Takemura, Evelyn, and Judy have some sort of story behind their body mods. I mean, Takemura has this... It's the whole... His entire... He never talks about it! Yes, Evelyn's quest revealed that she has a doll augmentation, which practically makes her a very high-end escort. But we have no backstory for that, or any dialogue options with her to explore what makes her, her. No one explains why they have body mods, which is either a very taboo subject or just a complete negligence on the part of writers. I'm just going to read the game's description, which says, a dangerous megalopolis obsessed with power, glamour, and ceaseless body modification. But in my opinion, glamour and body modifications are the same thing for CDPR. Body modifications in this game are purely a cosmetic for everyone except the player character. But maybe they only pertain to the player character. So let's look at how V gets body mods, and implicitly the progression system of this game. You start the game with what I perceive to be a very expensive flat, rented admittedly, with its own smart features and a weapons room. You're also given a car, which is not the best, but it kind of looks nice. You also meet Victor, your local cyber surgeon, who gives you a state-of-the-art Kiroshi eye implant for free. Remember, the developers want you to jump straight to the action, so they completely throw the concept of reward system out the window. So not only does this completely contradict the fact that V is taking a very dubious job because she needs the eddies, but as a player I don't know what's like to not have a flat and a car and the state-of-the-art Kiroshi implant. I'm not even sure if the implant did anything, since I didn't have enough time to play without it. This is a world where people supposedly do everything it takes to get body mods, to be more powerful and successful. But it appears V is already doing quite well for herself. Sure, when you're browsing through Victor's implants, you can think, well, wouldn't I love to have them all? But the game doesn't incentivize you to get them. The Kiroshi implant would have made more sense if we didn't possess the initial ability to scan the mobs in the rescue quest. Jackie could have said, we can scan enemies, wouldn't it be nice to have a Kiroshi implant right now so we can scan these bastardos? I apologize for that, people who actually speak Spanish. Body augmentations is one of the biggest sells of 2077. It's in the description of the game, but there is no extrinsic motivation to get them, which in turn creates no intrinsic motivation for the player to progress through the game. There is not a single mission in this game that motivates you to get body mods. For example, you know that mission where you have to jump high? Well, you can't make a 10-meter jump, you simply can't do it. Go work your ass off and come back when your legs put frogs to shame. This is a staple of sandbox role-playing games. You can't beat a difficult area, you go back, become stronger, and come back with a vengeance. Why do we get into Dexter Deshawn's car then? Because the game tells us to. I will say that towards the middle-end part of the game, some of the body mods that we can acquire are really expensive and really good. But at that point, we see them as nothing more than a weapon to kill enemies faster and better. Also, at that point, money is not really a problem, after I've sold the millions of weapons looted from enemies. Body augmentations are not part of the philosophy of 2077, and not even a part of the story in the sense that there is a direct correlation between us using them to the benefit of advancing the story. The only point of body mods in this game is carnage, as this ad accurately puts it. Kill more enemies in more ways. But if that were the case, the people who use them would very quickly be put outside of the law. Body mods would essentially be banned since their sole purpose is to kill people. You wouldn't have them advertised with impunity. And this brings us to another matter. Commercial ads in Night City. And I warn you that you might not want to look at the next images if you are eating right now. Ready? Okay, look away. I don't know who worked on these at CDPR, but I'm truly sorry for them, and I hope they are alright now. I mean, seriously, what manner of cosmic horror possessed the developers to make these? Why would you make these? What is the purpose? I understand that 2077 wants to be dystopian, and here they saw a chance to go all in, but the literal purpose of an ad is to look at, not away from. It just doesn't make sense to make them so disgusting, and when they sit right next to overtly sexual ads, the tone is not dystopian anymore, but disturbian. Get it? Disturbian. Not to say that some of them just look bad, like take this TV Fate Preacher wannabe commercial, which just looks like it came from the 90s. That was the point? Okay, sure. I will take this moment to remind you to press like if you're enjoying this video, and subscribe if you want to see more. New subscribers really motivate me to write video essays at the end of an 8-hour day of work. Let's continue with our cyber analysis of the game and talk about Netrunners. Netrunners is an occupation, but also one of the classes you can play in 2077. This is by far the most interesting concept of the universe, as these people are not simply hackers, but they can traverse a virtual network that has access to everything. Netrunning is not just an occupation, but a status. As a netrunner, you will be feared and scorned, as people know that you can simply plug into their lives and play with it like a programmer with a software. Netrunners are dangerous, unpredictable, and highly valued due to their hacking skills, which is why I was very surprised to find one as soon as I entered the game, dressed as Neo from the Matrix, simply standing at the corner of a street, with a skull hanging above their head and a quick scan revealing they are a netrunner. Maybe I would have liked to guess that. Netrunners should be mysterious, hidden, not chilling around your local noodle shop with lanyards around their necks saying what they are. Again, players are genuinely curious if this netrunner is involved in some sort of quest. And of course, he's not, because 2077 doesn't integrate elements that it introduces in the world. But I get it, the game wanted us to see a netrunner and the skull above his head just to be aware of how dangerous they are. Sure, that's one way to do it. The concept of netrunning, as most of anything in 2077, is taken straight from the Cyberpunk 2020 tabletop game. Let's just have a quick look at how it's presented there. Netrunners are outlaw computer jocks who are advanced versions of the computer hackers of the late 20th century. Netrunners operate on both sides of the complex and draconian laws covering computer crime in the cyberpunk world. Hard-driving computer cowboys, Netrunners literally take their lives into their hands as they tackle the mighty data fortresses and the deadly counter-intrusion programs that guard them. The ultimate challenge of man versus machine. Now, this is what I picked in my first playthrough of 2077 because that sounds like a no-brainer. Having access to people's homes and computers, reading their minds, traverse a 3D virtual world that even has a Dungeons & Dragons instance. It sounds like a potential different dimension to the game. The net could even be a minigame where you have to escape detection, a place where you can literally lose your life. Ditch the fake background stories and the street kid and make V a netrunner who ends up wanted by rebel punks as well as corporations for her netrunning skills. You can still do the heist main plot, but now V has a real stake, to do the biggest net penetration or hack in the history of Night City. Which does sound a bit more glorious than the breaking and entering burglary gone wrong that we're given. When we first see a netrunner in action, the game again teases us with purely cinematic gimmicks. Even though we subdue the Arasaka netrunner, somehow another one appears and kills T-Bug just as we try to escape the heist. We never find out who or get a chance to avenge T-Bug's death. Along with Jackie, she's just another likable NPC that is killed very quickly in the game, supposedly to make us hate Arasaka. Which we do get to destroy in the end and change the world for the better, right? At a first glance, netrunning skills look fun. You can make the weapons of the enemies glitch, you can blind them, and even fry their entire cybernetic implant, practically killing them. You can set them on fire. The problem is, it gets old, fast. If all we get from netrunning is attack skills, there is literally no difference between this and the spells of a D&D wizard. Weapon glitch is disarm, blind is, well, blind, and contagion is contagion. Data recycling is basically mana steal. I don't want to become glib, I know there are only so many ways in which you can use powers from a distance aggressively, but I would have loved to see a side of Netrunners that is not just combat, like stealing money from ATMs. Remember, we are in a cyberpunk dystopian universe. Money is a big problem. How about doing some odd jobs of stealing data from people? Those could have been some fun side quests. How about having a crafting system where we can make our own softwares, much like you can make potions in Kingdom Come Deliverance? I know, it sounds challenging, but I don't have $400 million and hundreds of people working for me. CD Projekt Red has, and if they really wanted to make a minigame mechanic for Netrunners, they could have. And now let's talk about brain dances, a really cool cyberpunk element of the game. We are introduced to brain dances very soon into the main quest, when we meet Evelyn and Judy. We are given the virtual experience of living inside someone's body as they get shot. This is brilliant. It's also possibly inspired from Altered Carbon, where people use a device to enter someone's consciousness. And before you say that the show came after Cyberpunk 2077, well, the book came out in 2012, right at the start of 2077's development. This could have been one of the coolest features in the game. To be able to experience someone's reality and play it back like a movie is something inherently disturbing and fascinating. And again, 2077 hints at hard-boiled fiction, as V is mostly using these brain dances for the purposes of investigation. But aside from the brain dance that Judy gives you initially and a few others, that's all you get from the experience. To make matters even worse, you can buy actual brain dances, but you're not able to see or play them. Instead, the brain dance editor that you carry with you is just a dead item. Again, a feature that could have become a minigame, the lack of which I would argue is one of 2077's biggest flaws in terms of world building, is left just as a teaser. Now, there is a strong argument against having brain dances to begin with. There is the idea of illegal brain dances, where people could experience the R word, or torture. Surely, even with the mature rating, CDPR would have had a problem selling that. And to be honest, no one wants it. The CIA technique torture I played in GTA 5 was enough for a lifetime. But they could have simply restricted the brain dances to murders, and there could have been some hilarious uses of brain dances as well. For example, a rich corporal reliving the experience of a normal working person, or getting to experience the normal day for a gang member, let's say the egregious Maelstrom. There were so many ways in which brain dances could have been used, and CDPR chose the easiest one: none. But let's give CDPR a break. Cyberpunk 2077 was never about the technological implications of a future dystopian city. It was about the punk. From the aggressive tone of the intro video, to the millions of bike riding, cyber samurai slashing videos out there, to the, I will admit it, gorgeous models of the characters, with their cosmetics and hair colors, 2077 was always more about the punk than the cyber. If you thought that V was the main protagonist of the game, well, you were wrong. It's Johnny Silverhand, the rockstar-made terrorist who shoots pheromones out of his custom-made 9mm handgun. He wants to bring down Arasaka, the big bad corporation, and nothing, even death, will stop him from doing that. And here we have the biggest problem of 2077, and probably the reason I went back to this essay after I initially abandoned it. The punk aspect of 2077 is poor, even poorer than its cyber aspect. Now, without trying to be pedantic, let's just look briefly at the word punk and what it means. A culture popular among young people, especially in the late 1970s, involving opposition to authority expressed through shocking behavior, clothes and hair, and fast, loud music. And there is also the evolution of the word, which means worthless, usually attributed to a young person. The movie Akira uses this theme extremely well, as the young people of Neo-Tokyo are treated badly, neglected, and even experimented upon. And so they end up joining bike gangs and fighting against society rather than becoming part of it. You cannot have punk without a palpable opposition to a de facto authority, whether that is the government, police, corporations, or in the case of Cyberpunk, a combination of the three. Let's look at the gangs of Night City, which form the semblance of an organized quote-unquote resistance. They look very punk, but there is a big problem. The gangs of Night City are all bad, and you're helping the police beat them at every turn. In fact, most of the money you make in this game is by slaughtering gang members and looting them. The game even has a soft pro-police tone. Right outside of your apartment, there are two officers who are checking on their colleague who lost a friend on the job. You can help them by talking to the cop in question. Then you have two officers at the bar commiserating over a job gone wrong, and about the fact that they don't have the proper equipment. They blame MaxStack, who are, mind you, the bad police. 2077 starts right off the bat with being pro-police, which is not a very punk tone. One of the very few romance options in this game is a detective. So again, I get the feeling one of the writers at CDPR wanted to pursue the hard-boiled detective vibe, but the other said, nah. But if the police are kind of okay and the gangs are all murderers with an antisocial syndrome, the punks in this game are exactly what the authoritarian regimes paint them to be, criminals with no redemption. So let's look at the gang in which I think CDPR put the most work, the Maelstrom, insanely augmented individuals who love techno music and drugs. One of the first missions V and Jackie do in the game is to acquire an infiltration robot from them, and to this day it remains the most complex mission in the game. There are 4 different outcomes to this, and whether you save Brick or not, 3 more potential outcomes for a future quest. The handcrafting that went into this is really top-notch, and the gameplay footage from this quest is basically what sold 2077 at E3 in 2018. One of the choices is that you can accept the money from Militech, decrypt the shard so that it doesn't attack Royce, and in effect ally yourself with Maelstrom, which is great. But there is a problem with this choice. The Maelstrom, as I said before, are constantly portrayed as very bad individuals. There is no incentive to like them. In all effect, they appear to be mindless beasts. So I did what most players probably did, and on this occasion went with the Militech lady. Not to say that spending 10 minutes to figure out how to decrypt the shard did not help the situation. A simple option for shards in your inventory would have helped, so that you don't have to hover over the journal to access them. But if 2077 is consistent with something, is that it never ceases to amaze. Let's just look at the outcome of the choice that I made, as I decided to attack Maelstrom. I leave their base and call for my car, which simply crash lands from the sky. Seconds later, the Maelstrom attacks me on the road. Now you can see from my not so terrific driving that I was taken by surprise. Then you hear the police dispatch with a unit responding, "Okay, on my way, but only because I like you." By the way, this is the police you help at every turn execute gang members. Now, as a law-abiding citizen who just took on an entire gang base, I'm thinking, hell yeah, I'm a bit overwhelmed at this point. Wouldn't mind some police backup considering how much I'm helping them. Even my Batmobile, which can't survive a crash land from the sky, can't take it anymore, so I finally have to face my tormentors. I let the neon of the city guide my samurai blade and eviscerate the first Maelstrom that dares to cross my path. A civilian car runs me over. The Batmobile finally explodes. It's chaos. The police arrives. Thank God, officers, these maniacs chased me across... Wait. What? Why are you shooting at me? Apparently, the criminal was me. I try to sort out the confusion in my head and then finally decide to run. Run and never look back. It's done. I get street cred, whatever that means. Now, you would say that after this fiasco, your reputation with Maelstrom is in the negatives and they attack you at every turn. But they just send a random car to chase after you when the game algorithm remembers. What happens if you do side with the Maelstrom? Well, you get to buy some guns from Dum Dum, Royce's lieutenant, and that's it. You can't work for them, you can't become one of them, and you still kill them in police events because at the end of the day, they do take people hostage and torture them. Let me make this clear. There are no real alliances with gangs in this game. Let's look at the next prevalent gang in the game. Tiger Claws are the Yakuza version of Night City, who use martial arts and are backed by the Arasaka Corporation. They are very cool. One of the most impressive characters in the entire game, in my opinion, is Wakako Okada. Now, this lady outlived 5 husbands, is a former MedDeck employee, she's a broker, fixer, she's full of tattoos, and she's acted superbly by Ren Hanami. There are 3 amazing opportunities to engage with Wakako, and all 3 are reduced to a few dialogue lines. For example, the rescue mission from the start of the game. Wakako simply rewards you for the mission without giving you any details on the kidnapped girl. Again, I thought this would have been a great opportunity for V to walk down the detective path and uncover a potential conspiracy behind Night City's corporations and gangs. The second quest with Wakako is when V is looking for Evelyn, another disappeared/kidnapped woman who this time we actually care about. V goes to Wakako to ask about an illegal brain dance that involves Evelyn. Wakako, who is knowledgeable of these things, says that such illicit information would cost you and you need to do something for her first. Then she sends you to a dangerous part of the town where a gang boss is rumored to collect such illegal brain dances. No, I'm kidding. She sends you to the brain dance shop next door. You go to the brain dance shop next door, and the owner, without any need for persuasion, tells you of a guy who sells hardcore illegal BDs literally at the end of the street. The guy in question is just a jaunt away in an underground passage. He sells you the BD with very little persuasion, and you can even negotiate the price. Now, just to do a quick lore check here. These are highly illegal brain dances called smuts. Remember when I said that CDPR would probably shy away from showing them in the game? Well, they're not. This is a BD of Evelyn being tortured and possibly killed. But the shock of this discovery is toned down considerably because of how easy it was to obtain it. This was not even a fetch quest. It was a dialogue quest where everyone involved was within walking distance of each other and required no persuasion. At this point, 2077 is not even pretending to be a role-playing game. But back to Wakako. The third opportunity to make her an important character is when you obtain information about the security of the Arasaka princess, whom we want to reach to tell her that her brother is a piece of work, and who tells us that she already knows. Again, Wakako simply gives us this extremely difficult to get information with no quid pro quo. And yes, I know V is doing some contracts for her, but they're purely optional. So, are tiger claws even important in this world, you ask yourself? Well, yes. In the Evelyn quest, you come upon a man asking them to fix the pipes, to which the tiger mobster kindly says yes. So again, there is an opportunity to humanize them and present some side to these gangs that is not just pure evil. But alas, we still end up killing them at every corner and stealing their fancy bikes. At the end of the day, the gangs of Night City are no different than the Murlocs of World of Warcraft, there for you to kill and loot at your discretion. Admittedly, very good looking and stylish Murlocs. But let's go to the Voodoo Boys. This gang is by far the most interesting group in Night City, as they combine net running with a sort of mystical, almost religious attitude. Fortunately, you don't get to kill Voodoo Boys simply because there's not many of them. Okay, maybe you can. We'll talk about that in a second. This is a gang that's supposed to be underground, hidden. But instead they are holed up inside a mall with dozens of armed goons around. Not very subtle and not very hackery and mysterious as they're supposed to be. They give me a guerrilla sort of vibe, but then, if they are guerrilla fighters, we fail to see them fight the dreaded max stack. Your first and only interaction with them is when V seeks them to ask them to remove Johnny and the relic from her head. You start with a quest in which Patrice, one of the gang's lieutenants, shows no interest in subterfuge, as you can just cut your way through the animals, yet another Murloc gang in Night City, to reach a Netwatch agent who works against them. You meet the Netwatch agent and you have two choices: to accept his offer to remove something inconsequential to the main plot, or incapacitate him and keep something that is inconsequential to the main plot. Okay, it's a virus Patrice installs in your head that would theoretically kill you. At the end of this quest, and the next one, which concludes your interaction with the Voodoo Boys, you have two options, which are both inconsequential to the main plot. Yes, you can kill the Voodoo Boys either by carrying back a virus from the agent, or by your own choice, if you care to remember that they tortured Evelyn, or you can let them live, which is the option that makes the least sense. Therefore, the only purpose of the Voodoo Boys is the fact that they help you navigate through Johnny's engram, where we meet Alt Cunningham, a character who is crucial to the main plot. They don't give you any physical reward to incentivize your player progression. You do get a jacket, if you kill all of them. You don't get to work for them outside of this quest. I really liked how this article from GameRant managed to contradict itself several times in just a few paragraphs. Players are faced with a difficult choice, though it won't affect the main story of the game in a significant way down the line. However, it's still a tough choice to make. No, it's not tough because it doesn't affect anything in the main story. So, let's see what we discover in Johnny's engram, and that is, what we already suspected, that Johnny is a bad friend, bad lover, and possibly the biggest asshole that Night City has to offer. The interesting part of the quest is when V is able to penetrate the Black Wall, a firewall created by authorities to keep away rogue AIs that could destabilize the entire net. You don't really have access to this net, need I remind you, so this feels disconnected from the game's story in a way. This is where we find Alt Cunningham, Johnny's ex-girlfriend, who's now become a powerful AI. She is indifferent to V's dying issue, but offers to free V of her body and recopy her if V and Johnny destroy the Mikoshi database, an Arasaka computer that holds the consciousness of other victims of the Soul Killer chip. The story culminates when V manages to destroy Mikoshi, but Alt tells her that V's body was too damaged and she will only have 6 months to live if she retains her consciousness. If, however, she lets Johnny take her body, he's kind of immune to the whole thing and he'll live on to be an asshole another day. Book spoiler warning ahead. This is similar to the Neuromancer plot, where Case, the book protagonist, is looking for a way to free a super AI and reunite it with its other half, who is locked tight behind a firewall of sorts. Towards the end of the book, the super AI offers Case to remain with it inside the cyberspace, the same offer V gets from Alt should she decide to very generously leave her body to Johnny. But let's look at the most obvious punk element of 2077, which is of course the grumpy, incorrigible Johnny Silverhand. And yet again, CDPR promises us something and gives us something else.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
If only this scene was in the game. V is obviously not in good shape, and we see this apparition of a very cool and confident looking rocker played by Keanu Reeves telling us, you know what, it doesn't matter if you're down, there will be hell to pay and I'm going to help you do it. And then Daddy Reeves calls us a samurai. Now look, you might think at times this video comes across as pretentious, that I'm advocating for some sort of perfect cyberpunk game. But at the end of the day, I am a basic gamer with basic gamer needs. I like adrenaline, I like a good revenge story, and I definitely like a scene where the character played by Keanu Reeves tells me to get the F up, pull myself up, and do something about it. This moment is not just punk, it's 200% punk, and I love it. But it's not in the game, and that's not the character that we get. Johnny Silverhand turns out to be the sour ghost of a middle-aged man who goes through a midlife crisis post-mortem. And that's not even the main issue with Johnny Silverhand, it's his backstory. Arguably, the worst thing someone can do is to use a nuclear bomb. There's really no excuse for it, and that makes Johnny an actual terrorist. He does have moments of endearment, and he does grow on you, and some scenes with him are genuinely funny. But it seems like he has a lot of work to do right off the bat to clear his name. Not that he's trying to do that, as he seems to have no remorse for bombing the Arasaka headquarters. I think CDPR's idea was to give us this irredeemable pirate that we learn to accept and forgive. But between him and V's confusing personality, to say the least, it just doesn't work. Johnny's whole spiel is that he wants revenge for the fact that Arasaka kidnapped his hacker girlfriend, even though he is the one who accidentally kills her. He has a clear case of narcissism, and in this regard, he does fit the personality of a cyberpunk character. V's motivation in this game is to get a name for herself. Her ambition makes her lose everything, and that's how she ends up with the Soul Killer chip accidentally implanted in her head. The Soul Killer has Johnny's personality in it, so he ends up suggesting what V should do, and in some cases he even demands it. That's how V and Johnny end up becoming one character who is confronted with a split personality. We can choose to become Johnny and continue a legend, or die as V and retain our principles. Or at least that's my take on it. It sounds very cool on paper, but it just doesn't work in a game. With Johnny constantly buzzing in our ears, it's like the game is telling us repeatedly what sort of character we should be, instead of letting us become that character in an organic way. In the end, it feels like we're playing someone else's story. Let's look in CDPR's own garden, at Witcher 3. Imagine a story in which Geralt, our protagonist, ends up possessed by the ghost of a witcher who died 200 years before. A witcher, let's say, who has some vendetta against the kings. The story revolves around that witcher's opinions of monsters and whether they should live or die, and not Geralt's. About that witcher's relationship with Ciri and not yours, the player. To be a witcher is to take a drowner by their balls. Imagine those sorts of comments in the game, and not Geralt saying that the wind is howling and reflecting in the silence of the player's mind if the creature he just killed really deserved to die because some peasants or a noble couldn't coexist with it. Wouldn't that have changed the game completely and made you feel like you were looking in from the outside? Now let's look at V for a second, because I said her personality was confusing, for me at least. V, ignoring her tepid backstory, comes across as streetwise. She didn't strike me as the underdog for 1 second, especially after the scene in which she explains to Evelyn how things work in Night City. V is arrogant and a know-all, and that's not a decision we as the player make. At the worst of times, she comes across as annoying, especially when she berates Jackie for the heist mission. Again, I think an underdog who is new to Night City and comes across as a bit more humble and naive would have worked much better, and much more in tone with the cyberpunk setting. Henry from Kingdom Come Deliverance, for example, not only has humble beginnings, but comes across as a bit of an idiot sometimes. But then we see his intelligence and sarcastic personality start to emerge slowly through interactions with the world. He grows on us, and the game lets us slip into his personality gradually. Commander Shepard was likable because she was reserved. Most of us players are reserved. We're socially anxious. That's why we play role-playing games. We don't want a cocky main character who scolds their friends left and right and seems to know more about the world than we do. But let's get back to the cyberpunk genre. CDPR's solution to the bad launch of 2077 was to create an anime called Cyberpunk 2077 Edgerunners, instead of fixing the game. I'm mentioning this here because this was a very obvious marketing stunt. And it worked. Players in their millions walked to some random trash bin, watched the brain dance showing the opening of the animation, and then waited. And waited. And waited for someone from David's crew to call them back. And then they drove for 10 minutes to the edge of town to get a yellow jacket. To get this. At this point, I'm just baffled at how arrogant CDPR can be sometimes. But Edgerunner is, as expected, much more immersed in the cyberpunk genre. I mean, for crying out loud, it's an anime of sorts. David, the main protagonist, struggles to pay his tuition, and his mother works hard to keep him in school. Much like V, he is accidentally implanted with a military-grade cybernetic implant, but this time there is no Johnny Silverhand. The implant just makes him very fast. Good, maybe we should have had that in the game. When his mom dies, he decides to become an edgerunner, a high-tech black market mercenary. In Edgerunners, cyberpsychosis is a real consequence, as David himself is in danger of succumbing to it. There are all sorts of twists and betrayals that one would expect from a good story, and towards the end you find yourself a bit attached to the characters. The writers keep the cast small and tight and manage to keep the story focused. Similar to 2077, the protagonist ends up fighting Adam Smasher, a villain who appears for a good 30 seconds in the game. In Edgerunners, he is given more screen time to, introduce his character. But even the animation fails to give him depth and presents him as this emotionless evil that has no regard for life. I mean, sure, that's one way to create a character, it's just not good. Back to Cyberpunk 2077, and I have to make a big confession near the end of this video. I like this game. If you think someone can spend dozens of hours writing an essay about a game and then dozens more editing it, and does so while hating the game the entire time, well, it's just not true. All these critics you see of video games, they have a love-hate relationship with the games they critique. And the keyword here is love. No, I don't hate 2077. I think CDPR produced the most expensive demo of a cyberpunk open world. It failed, in my opinion, but it put down the foundation for something that potentially can be really good in the future. I think CDPR's GTA take for a cyberpunk world was extremely ambitious. Open worlds are very difficult to make, and this game might have needed 4 more years to be fully developed, maybe even more. But alas, the shareholders got antsy and preferred the launch of a very flawed game. Why do I like 2077? Because I have no choice. This is the only open world cyberpunk AAA game out there. And there are moments in this game that I truly enjoyed. Like driving around town with Judy and listening to the radio, and trying my hardest to ignore that the lights turn green as soon as she approached them. The environment and character design in some spots are mind-blowing. Hair physics are so smooth, they make me want to shave my hair, and the music is really on point. From the main theme composed by Marcin Przybiowicz to the banger Rebel Path by P.T. Adamczyk, the music sets an authentic cyberpunk tone. There are influences of the original Blade Runner track by Vangelis, and some modern composers like Perturbator and Hyper. The music of cyberpunk is very good, and I will admit it, dashing around with a katana and stopping bullets mid-air feels really satisfying. If only V's walking animation didn't feel like she was wearing Dutch wooden shoes. Look, I'm not even going to address how empty the world of 2077 feels sometimes, with parts of the town that just feel unfinished. How the dialogue options most of the time don't even count. How the different skill specs that you pick simply give you a shortcut through badly designed mission levels. How V has the strongest chokehold on Earth. Because that would mean we are reviewing the game, although you can argue that every detail counts if you're going to make this cyberpunk world feel immersive. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, which is Poland's growing ultra-nationalist sentiment. No, it's Phantom Liberty. Let's talk about Phantom Liberty. I must confess that I really didn't expect the plot of Phantom Liberty to take this route. You must save the president. President Myers. 24, Jack Bauer style, with government conspiracy and all of that. Now, I was actually not too bothered by this because I happen to be a fan of 24, And the time spent with the president, dodging drones and bad guys while we make our way through the infamous Dogtown, felt much more immersive than the plot of the base game. There is some sort of urgency to this, a sense of survival. It just feels better. We finally have the motivation of V not doing this just for glory and eddies. She's doing all of this with the promise that Songbird will get rid of the relic and Johnny for good. We finally have a proper boss that uses the level design and environment, and we have to be a bit crafty about defeating it. I like the direction of the reduced and claustrophobic environment. It gives the story more edge. Almost gave me a Metro 2033 feel. You confront tough enemies, run and survive, which already finds me much more invested in the game. And for one sweet moment, I almost thought I needed to pick the correct line of dialogue that would make for a successful persuasion. But then I remembered that there is no such thing as a persuasion system in 2077. But I was finally able to choose a peaceful option with the goons that find your hiding place and actually unlock them as NPCs who seem to have depth, which felt much better than the kill or not kill option in order to get a jacket from the base game. I think the keyword here is depth. It just seems like the writers took a bit more care of their characters and didn't rush them. Even fixers have a story now and dialogue lines that don't feel stale and empty. And finally, I really like this view from the abandoned flat, which really screams Cyberpunk at you. It feels like CDPR really took their time with this one. However, the level design is still very basic. You have to crouch and press F to unlock the only path forward. There was a kind of Gandalf moment in the tunnels where you had to decide left or right. Again, even an illusion of choice is better than no choice. The dialogue options are still mainly inconsequential, and cinematic gameplay still reigns supreme, where we would have liked to actually do things ourselves and not just press F to prevent falling asleep. And the NPCs are still doing the walk. The long, winding, unending walk. Wait, is that Evelyn? But that's not what bothered me with Phantom Liberty. It's the whole premise. You save the president. You fight against the guy who is a rebel, a terrorist. I can't help but get a Splinter Cell, Call of Duty vibe from this. Again, I'm honestly curious. Does CDPR actually want to make a Cyberpunk game? Because if they do, they have to go back and watch The Matrix. Or, I don't know, just play Deus Ex, the first game. Yeah, the one that was made 25 years ago. And I know it's easy to point to the best Cyberpunk game ever made, and compare 2077, which is a single installment, with Deus Ex, which is a long-established franchise. So let's look briefly at an indie game. I recently came across a game called NeoCab, in which you follow Lena, a cab driver who moves to the big city Los Ojos, in search of new prospects and to reconnect with her best friend. We are immediately introduced to Lena's fears about how she left things with her friend, her dislike of Capra, the mega corporation that has automated all the cabs in LO, and the prospects of an uncertain future where technology will reign supreme. All these things come up as you're driving your first customer, who, just like you, is moving to the city for a new life venture. You can enter a disagreement with the customer or choose to appease them at the cost of your own emotions. The game doesn't tell you that it's a core mechanic of gameplay, nor does it give you any help in providing a 5-star service to your customers. So when I got my first 5 stars, it felt really good, like I figured the game out or something. You finally meet Savvy, your old friend, and she gives you a bracelet that tracks and exhibits your emotions in the form of colors. This is fascinating, but at the same time makes you wonder of the implications of it becoming a real gadget in the future. This is what Cyberpunk should feel. Futuristic, but at the same time very possible, very near. The music, the atmosphere, they're great. Without giving you any spoilers, the game also involves an investigation, which makes NeoCab, a low-budget indie game, check the holy trinity of our cyberpunk creation. 1. A fight against greedy corporations, defying the corrupt government and bringing down the status quo. 2. Addressing the question of what it means to be human, human versus machine, and the post-human created by advanced technology. 3. A noir theme featuring a detective, even someone who is not police, who discovers mysteries behind the dystopia of our cyberpunk world. For some reason, CDPR never embraces these 3 points fully. I think CDPR should go back to that rescue mission. They had something good there. And I think they should stop making us kill punks. They're supposed to be the heroes in this universe. And talking about open worlds, yes, they are impossible to make, I think especially for a cyberpunk universe. But in order to make any world alive, You need good stories. I think CDPR focused so much on the word cyberpunk that they forgot what role-playing is at its core. Relatability, humanity, realism. Just like any other open-world game, before you make it sci-fi or fantasy or cyberpunk, you first need to make a good world. There is a side quest in the base game where you meet a talking vending machine. It's wholesome, funny, and even philosophical at some level. Those are the moments that make the world come alive. And then you can call it whatever you like, because I feel like I can relate to it and belong in it. Thank you for making it this far and for watching the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think CDPR needs to improve or change for Cyberpunk 2? Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It really helps, as these videos take a ton of time to make. And, in true cyberpunk spirit, keep fighting the good fight.